Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I am joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. How are we?
I'm well, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm interested in the topic we will be discussing today. I think it is a little bit more sensitive and serious in nature, but that's what we do on this podcast. As per our description, we talk all things. Doesn't matter if it's controversial, doesn't matter if it's somewhat
Taboo.
sensitive or taboo.
Definitely a taboo topic today.
100%. With that being said, though,
We're keen to dive into
the
it.
taboo topics are the ones where I think most people will derive the most value.
I'd want to listen to it. You know, if I was listening to someone else's potty at the age of 25, 26, I would want to hear an episode like this, especially from blokes, because we don't often talk about this stuff as blokes. There are plenty of girls out there that talk about these things, which is awesome because it makes you better when you hear this from someone's perspective and you know that you're not alone, maybe.
100%.
Guys need to talk about this stuff a bit more.
I reckon so, especially if it's affecting them. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is understanding and overcoming sexual insecurity, especially if you're a man. Now, this is not to say that women aren't privy or affected by similar insecurities. They are, but I think given that we're both two blokes now, mid-20s, it might be a little bit more relevant to touch on this.
But
So-
before we kick it off, when it comes to girls, no doubt they should be taking this on board as well and understanding it from the perspective of a guy, because as we know, it takes two to tango. You are in there as a girl in the bedroom with a guy, so it is going to be really helpful for you to have insight into what may be going on in the guy's mind in those scenarios.
100%. And a lot of what we will talk about today is the tip of the iceberg, pun intended. But a lot of these things and issues should actually be consulted with a medical practitioner or a psychologist. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today are general principles to be aware of. There is no cookie cutter approach to overcoming one's sexual insecurity because each problem is unique and it has to be treated with unique solutions and treatments. So that's something we do want to highlight. That being said, the principles are evidence-based. The principles have been tested and it's something that we should talk about. So without further ado, what does sexual insecurity look like?
It can show up in different ways, whether you are in a relationship or whether you are single. But like you said earlier, the principles do remain the same. It can be the feeling of underperforming. It can be the feeling of maybe overperforming. The feeling of not knowing maybe what to do in the bedroom in these situations, the anxiety that comes with it, the panic that might come with it, maybe just being too in your head and not having the ability to just enjoy the moment with the person that you are doing the thing with because you're maybe so fixated on the outcomes.
100%. And for a lot of men, this can manifest as insecurities around their penis size, around their ability to maintain an erection, of premature ejaculation, and so forth. And the problem is, I think, especially when it comes to men, a lot of men tend to over-identify with their sexual performance as a marker of their masculinity. And as we know with anything, if you start to equate your identity and your self-worth with your performance, irrespective of whether it's in the bedroom or not, that can be a very vulnerable proxy. And what I mean by that is if things aren't going as well as you want, well, your self-worth takes a hit. And I think this is where when I said consulting with a psychologist, consulting with a medical practitioner is a little bit more relevant in this case because everyone's own identities can be quite different. But it's not an uncommon theme in men's lives to identify a lot of their self-worth, their masculine identity with whether they're able to please their girlfriend or whether they're able to, have a good performance in the bedroom, right?
Yeah, it's actually bringing to mind an analogy about sports even. I know we always come back to sports, but we've had some athletes on the show talk about the tendency to almost identify solely with their performance in a sporting lens. The same goes for here. Imagine being that player that only feels like they are worthy, they are masculine, they are known, they are feeling good about themselves when they are getting 25 touches and 3 goals a game. If you're only feeling a man in those scenarios, if you're only feeling good about yourself and your performance in those scenarios and attaching that to your identity, there will be problems. So as we speak about it from a sporting lens, the same goes from the lens of your career. If you feel like you're only performing well in your career, then that therefore means that you are better as a person when you're performing well career-wise. Same goes for sexually as well.
100%. And I think there's a common theme in overcoming a lot of these insecurities. It's whether it's in a sports environment or the occupational environment or even in the bedroom, it's getting the person to switch their focus from the outcome to the process.
Exactly right.
And being present in the moment. So the best athletes aren't the ones who are fixated on whether they're going to win or lose. They're fixated on being in the moment, on executing the fundamental skills and almost detaching themselves from the result. And that's usually that's when athletes will often say, that's when I was having my most fun. It wasn't when I was thinking about the win or loss or how many touches I had to get. It was about just knowing that I was out there and I could fully embrace the moment.
How many times do you hear athletes say, and this is actually quite relevant because Essendon did win on the weekend, which I'm sorry to bring up. I know you're a Melbourne fan, mate. We all know that by now. But Isaac Kako and Nate Caddy did speak about their win, and they said, we were just having so much fun and we detached from the outcome. And because we were having so much fun on the footy field, we were able to win. The same goes here. If you're just able to detach from the outcome, detach from the ability and the need to, make your partner climax or to last a certain amount of time, but you're actually able to stay in the moment and have fun, you will probably see better results for yourself.
100%. And the truth of the matter is, if you can, the question, I think most people understand that, yeah, great, I'm in my head. I know I'm in my head, but what can I do about it to get myself out of it? Again, general principle is some form of attentional control, some ability to get yourself out of your head and into your body.
Slow it down. How do we make that make sense?
Well, I want to tell you the solutions, my friend. don't, what's it called? There's no need for some premature excitement.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay. Another pun. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very punny episode. Look, truthfully, we've got to look at what causes it. And there's various causes, but I think for men, let's just, nip it in the bud. Pornography use, especially excessive pornography use. We know
so much research around this nowadays.
There's a lot of data supporting it, especially that if a young boy's first encounter with sexual material is pornography, over time, they end up becoming quite desensitized to the original material that they were exposed to. After a while, they'll start seeking out more and more aggressive or more confronting material as a means of arousing themselves in the same way they had the initial arousal, right? And that can be quite scary because we know pornography doesn't depict sex in an accurate way. We've had multiple episodes in the past where we've spoken about that pornography is just a performance, ultimately.
Quick plug to Catherine Lyle. We really dived into this rather with her.
100%. And there's even, if we're going back to the Big Bros origin days, we did have an episode on pornography. And one thing I do remember saying in that is that a lot of the things that at least young boys find attracting, like breasts or, someone's bottom or whatever you want to call it, all of those qualities are...
We'll call it the glutes, mate, from a physio perspective.
Sounds good. All of those things are accentuated in pornographic material because what are you ultimately doing? The dopamine hit, right? The quick access dopamine, the ability for someone to log on to their internet provider, go onto their Safari on their phone and go onto a porn website. Maybe now you just have to get a VPN because, the government's trying to crack down on it.
Very good, though, that is happening because it'll deter people. It'll deter people from having that access to it.
100%. And I think people are naturally skeptical of having their details recorded through their phone naturally. And I think especially if they are doing something like, accessing adult content. The point, though, is if you've never had a sexual experience before and your entire association with what sex is based off a pornographic film where they're essentially well-paid actors, then...
Given a lot of supplements
also in like... A lot of it's artificial as well.
Yes.
Like a lot of people aren't... It's perceiving a very unrealistic and idealistic body shape, as we know. And often in these films, it's not a 5-10 minute sexual encounter. A lot of the times, adult films go for a while. Mm-hmm. So what people and young kids who are impressionable, especially teenagers, what they end up learning is that if that's what's displayed on my screen, that must be therefore what I have to do in the bedroom. And that becomes a massive problem because what we know is that a lot of young boys then end up with natural anxieties. Like, think of being intimate with someone for the first time, as scary as it is. You know, boy or girl, it is a very confronting experience. You need to feel safe. You want to feel comfortable. You want to feel that you're ready for the experience. Now, you add someone's... Now you've exposed this kid as well to a bunch of adult content, and they've got all these preconceived notions that don't actually stack up in reality. You're setting up this person to fail.
Yeah, big time. So not much more to add there other than the fact that this is harmful. This is toxic. It is toxic to be watching that content, and watching that content will take away your tendency to want to do the thing in real life with real people.
100%.
You've spoken about it there from a observation perspective, the fact that you're observing this material and then therefore thinking that you need to perform in that way. That is one harmful thing about it. The other harmful thing about it, which we might not have really touched on, is the readiness to, or the accessibility to pornography. And if you are someone that does engage with that content quite regularly, like you said at the start, it will stop you from feeling as excited when presented with a real person in real life when it is in front of you, because you've seen these things for yourself on a screen so often. You know, those kids that do it every day, sometimes multiple times a day, they're almost desensitized to it. They're desensitized to a real life experience, which is really harmful and can therefore lead to these problems.
100%. And I think the reason that sexual insecurity, and like let's manifest this into a real life example. Let's say you've got a young man who is watching a lot of pornography, and then they've got a partner, and when they're trying to be intimate, he struggles to get an erection. He can't get hard for whatever reason, and then he gets into his head and he starts saying like, oh crap, my girlfriend's going to reject me. She's going to think I'm less of a man. She's going to think about all her exes that were able to satisfy her. And then what ends up happening is this guy can't actually enjoy the moment.
It's got a negative thought pattern.
So he's already in his head, correct? And there's a part of the brain, I'm not going to bore you with the scientific details, but it is important. There's a part of the brain called the posterior insula, and that's essentially responsible for sensory information. It's essentially a region that gives us information from our own body. So if I'm touching your hand right now, my posterior insula is activating and telling me that my hand is touching your hand, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is, in erectile dysfunction, so things like someone who can't literally get an erection, studies have shown that their posterior insula is far less activated. Now, you know what's really, really interesting about that? Mm-hmm. You can actually increase that activation through meditation and through attentional control exercise, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But what it shows is quite interesting. It's like your brain is literally responding to the changes.
Well, that's encouraging to hear.
It's encouraging because you can use, I always say this, you can always use your biology to your advantage, right? And you can activate certain parts of your brain through conscious practice and through deliberate practice. But I think
it's all science. We're scientific beings.
I guess we are. But the thing is, when you are in your head, everyone, like I'm telling you, I know that there'll be people listening to this podcast and saying, I know I'm in my head. Like, I don't need you to drongos telling me that I'm in my head. But like, how do I actually
get out of it?
And what's the actual issue going on? Because for someone, they might have the issue of not getting erection. They might actually be able to, but they have a perceived issue with perceived ejaculation, like premature ejaculation. Something that I want to talk about with you is some stats. Are you ready to hear it?
I'm ready. Talk to me.
All right. We know that pornography obviously has its fair share of misconceptions, or a lot of people can derive misconceptions about sex.
Sure.
Here's some interesting stats. The average sexual act is 3 to 7 minutes.
Right.
50% of women will want the act to end at around 10 to 15 minutes.
50, that's a fair amount.
That's what the stats say. And about 20 to 30% of women can achieve orgasm through penetrative sex. So that's about 70 to 80% that can't.
Can't achieve an orgasm through penetrative sex alone.
Okay. So imagine you are a guy who's watching pornography, and the average sexual act in every film they've watched is like a half an hour to 60 minutes.
Yeah, or at least longer than 3 to 7 minutes. Yeah.
Correct. So definitely not, greater than 50% of women aren't wanting the act to end.
So it doesn't add up.
And then if every girl is reaching some form of climax, what does that signal?
that what you're seeing is a complete lie.
It's a complete lie. It's a fabrication. Now, for some, they might listen to those stats and think, great, like, you know, that actually caused a lot of my anxiety because...
Still get me out of my head, though.
But still get me out of my head, right?
Yeah.
But I still want to talk about those stats just for a little bit longer because, like, what are your thoughts? Like, I've just read you that. Is there anything surprising for you reading that?
Nope. I wouldn't think so, no. And that's what the evidence says after all. So we are two scientific people here, and we are not going to disagree with what the evidence says.
We won't. Another thing I do want to talk about, though, are the catastrophizing, the mental loops. And the reason I want to talk about it is if you're a young man and you've had a sexual experience where you can't get it up, or you've busted your nut too early, or you are just struggling and you don't want to get back into the bedroom, you end up getting into a really vicious cycle of avoidance. And some of the conversations that might be happening for you in your head is, will my partner leave me? Will my partner think I'm less of a man? Will my partner just not want anything to do with me?
So you're just fearful to just do it all together.
100%. And that can create more of an issue. That can spiral. And I have a lot of empathy for the men who might be going through that experience, because what ends up happening there is, great, we've catastrophized, we're looking at the worst case scenario, but none of these, or some men might be, but a large proportion of their men aren't giving themselves the permission to fact check their own catastrophization.
And this is where medical intervention really comes into the picture.
Things like couples counseling can be helpful, but even if the person wants to seek therapy themselves, I think figuring out your own unhelpful thinking traps can be quite useful. It's like...
I meant psychological medical intervention, that is. Getting help.
For sure. Because think about it this way. Let's say like you go to therapy and you're telling your therapist like, I just feel like less of a man. Like, why is she with me? You know, like I know she tells me she loves me, but I just can't help but shake the feeling that she's just going to leave me. A therapist, again, and a friend can do this as well. Anyone who's got a semblance of EQ hopefully might be able to assist you with. But it's like stress testing your own ideas can be quite helpful. It's something that can help you actually identify. Like, it's like if you feel like your sexual performance hasn't been up to scratch, have you even had the conversation with your partner? It's like before you even go to a therapist or go to a doctor or whatever, have you had the transparency of conversation? Have you discussed what's actually going on for you? And I get it. That's a vulnerable spot to be going into. But I think that's a prerequisite that has to be had, don't you reckon?
Absolutely. And this is obviously a bit more, that was more tailored towards people that are in a relationship.
Sure.
What about the people that aren't in a relationship here? So for the ones that aren't in a relationship, and still we're coming back to that topic sentence or the essay question here as to how do I still get out of my head? How do I get out of my head? And here for the ones that maybe are actually single and aren't in a relationship, like what we've mentioned, you really must talk about this with a professional to talk through not only what is happening or not happening on a sexual level, but across other domains of your life, because it's very likely that these things are coming to be due to other contributing factors. It might be stress in other parts of your life that can be therefore causing you stress when it comes to something that requires a lot of vulnerability and a lot of rawness and a lot of patience as well, and safety in the act of being intimate. So talk about this thing from a global perspective with a professional, not just talking about how you are sexually, but be open with that medical person, that therapist that does want to help you. Talk about what else is going on in your life, because probably just by simply talking about it will already help you in a massive way, more than what you probably thought it would help you in, just by getting those things off your chest and putting it out there into the ether, and therefore having that almost those bricks taken off your shoulders.
Ultimately, you're getting clear on what the issue is. And you mentioned, what do you do if you're that single guy? And I'm fully conscious that if you're a single guy who is essentially just getting sex through casual means, or you're starting to see someone and you don't have much sexual experience, it's hard to know what your sexual insecurity is until you've actually been in the bedroom. So let's say you've had a few casual counterparts and experiences in the past where you couldn't maintain an erection for whatever reason. You've got a bit of data there to suggest. Now, if you're that young man and it's really, really bothering you, I think you should probably rule out the medical causes first, because there could be medical issues. Are you, fit, healthy, and active? Is there anything else going on from a medical aspect? If it's not, then the data might suggest that it's more psychogenic. So it's psychologically induced anxiety that's keeping you in your head and not enabling you to perform as you like. But I think you just have to once you're at the start line and you actually experiment, you'll kind of figure out quite quickly what's going on for you. I would still say, even if you are someone who has sexual insecurity, there's a world in which you could probably communicate that vulnerability without it almost saying to the person you're about to sleep with, hey, I'm completely impotent right now. I need you to do all the work. But you can speak to a sex therapist, you can speak to people, you can ask people who actually specialize in this domain, what do I do when I'm in that situation? Again, we're probably going over general principles today, but the first, I think, focus for you would be to figure out what your main issue is. What's actually going through your head if you are in a situation where you're about to, take your clothes off and sleep with someone?
Sure.
Is your thoughts that you're getting, I'm not going to get an erection? Okay, what else is happening? What's happening to your body at that time as well? Chances are your heart rate's increasing, your muscles tensing up. Your body and mind is in a state that is really in the antithesis of wanting to have sex.
You're not relaxed. You're not feeling safe. You're feeling like your fight and flight response is through the roof. You're tensed up. So yeah, you're exactly right. It's not in the state of being anywhere near the ability of being sexually active with someone in that moment. It needs to relax. And that brings us to a very well researched, principled solution.
So the National Institute of Health published a scoping review of the influence of mindfulness on men's sexual activity, essentially looking at things like meditation, and looked at what it could help with. They've reviewed a bunch of studies to say what is the consensus. The consensus was that mindfulness can help break the cycle of distraction and self-criticism, the idea of spectatoring during sex, which is a major cause of anxiety and dysfunction. Studies show that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy can improve erectile function and help manage premature ejaculation by increasing control and reducing premature ejaculation scores. And the regular practice of mindfulness is associated with higher levels of sexual desire, arousal, and satisfaction, acting as a buffer against negative genital self-image. Now, the question is, okay, what's your actual conception of mindfulness? I think a lot of people, when they think of mindfulness, they think, oh, it's just going to help me relax. And whilst that's one of the consequences of it, it's not the main reason people design mindfulness. The reason people have designed mindfulness is to help you get good at controlling where your focus and attention goes. Remember that I mentioned that part of the brain?
Yep. The posterior insula.
That's right. Mindfulness ends up targeting that spot, because if you're consistently getting into the routine of trying to train your prefrontal cortex and the parts of your brain to take stock of what you're focusing on, naturally you get better at it. Neural connections will form. There'll be greater activity in certain brain regions. I think that's like more. I do think you need some sort of circuit breaker where you're in that state. I always say it's hard to think your way out of an anxious situation. Something physiological usually does the trick just a bit better, because it can act like a circuit breaker. Something else you can do is tune into your body. You can use your 5 senses. You can breathe. You can do a body scan exercise. Now, I understand that's not going to work for everyone, but it can work for a lot of people.
Are we suggesting from this study that you should be doing or practicing mindfulness in those moments, or this is away from your sexual encounter?
I think as a general day-to-day practice, and of course even beforehand can be helpful. If you know you're about to have a booty call, I mean, there's no reason why you can't do mindfulness before you attend to such booty call. But the question is, how long until I see the effects? And the reality is, it's not uncommon. I've heard stories before anecdotally and even in research where a person has really bad sexual insecurity. They go to their doctor, they go to their GP prescribes them like a Viagra. They take the Viagra not for the intention of using it every time they have sex, but to get over the mental hurdle of getting an erection. Mm-hmm. They take the Viagra, they get the erection, they have sex, and then their confidence is uplifted so much. It's like that key forward who hasn't been able to kick goals for like 4 or 5 weeks.
So it's a circuit breaker.
It's a circuit breaker. They've kicked the goal. So what does this show? It shows that for some people, it might require them just a little bit of a mental boost. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not going to be prescribing people. I am not going to be recommending people to go and get Viagra. That is, again, I'm going to cover my bases here and say that is a conversation that has to happen exclusively between you and your doctor. But what I will say, there is an interesting principle there, which is you can get over mental hurdles through a one-time thing. Now, the meditation is something that the results will start to yield itself probably after a while, like a few months. But I think regardless if it's sexual insecurity or work performance, I think having greater attentional control is just a benefit all around.
Well, it comes back to the presence in that moment, doesn't it? So what does it mean for you to have fun and enjoy a sexual encounter? You need to know, firstly, who you're with in that moment right then and there. As dumb as that might sound, you need to be able to actually maybe disassociate from thinking about yourself and the outcome and focus on the person, the woman who is right in front of you in this moment, and adjust to the senses that you're feeling. Use those five senses like the study mentions, like the advice mentions, really tap into the present moment there through your breathing, through the five senses. And one thing I'd like to add to that as well is, we mentioned at the start of the episode how as men there is that awful tendency to attach your masculinity to great outcomes and to high outcomes and to better outcomes, and to feel like you're more of a man when you get better results. So maybe this might be a case of removing your ego in this situation, not coming into sexual activities or even just environments with girls where you feel like you need to get a result. You feel like you need to be at your very best each time. So taking away that ego and just, again, focusing on the present moment, focusing on who you're with in that moment, and using your senses to your advantage, and saying goodbye to that ego of yours that is telling you that you must get a result here or else they're going to think less of you. That is a key step that we have not touched on just yet.
Well, I think it will lend itself to the next point, but that's a really interesting reframe. Okay, well, what are we going to do? Well, what do we reframe our goal? Because, as men, we want to have goals, but it's like, okay, it's probably like saying, don't have a goal. It's like saying, don't think of the pink elephant. But what you can do, what if your goal was just to have fun, in that experience? Keep it broad.
Like on the footy field, just go out there and have fun.
It's true. Fuck, we're such blokes using footy as an analogy.
It's always a good analogy, isn't it?
It is. I think something also I do want to touch on as well. It's like there could be a lot of other things going on for a guy who can't get an erection or is busting their nut too quickly. Premature ejaculation, as the formal term goes. But are they depressed? Are they anxious? Is there something a bit more clinically significant going on?
Which of those contributing factors?
100%. I think that it might be really reductionist sometimes of us to say, well, just tune into your body, do more meditation, do attentional control. But there's probably other things at play potentially as well that might be worth addressing. So. And it's like, if you were to treat that with the other stuff, we don't know. Again, that's a conversation for you and a therapist. But another thing that you can also do with a therapist is potentially process emotional wounds that were left through early experiences of sex. Like, you may have never had an insecurity until later. And it might be worth unpacking why a certain, you could have had a really adverse sexual experience where you, for example, maybe were with someone, they made a comment about your performance and that stunted any sort of confidence you did have.
Sure.
Did you ever take the time to try and make sense of what that experience meant to you? Did that experience or memory almost lay unraveled in your psyche? And now it manifests itself in the diminished confidence. So I think you have to get clear, as I said, whether you're single or in a relationship, it actually doesn't matter. What are your earliest experiences of when did that feeling of insecurity come about, and what do you associate with it? And I always say, like, sometimes the best way forward is through feeling it rather than trying to think your way out of it. I think you do both. But I want to talk to you about this next technique.
Go on.
So this is not uncommon if you're ever seeing a sex therapist, but let's say you're in a relationship and there is, like, you've got a lot of debilitating anxiety about having sex. You've made up excuses like, oh, you're not feeling well, your back hurts, and you're just trying to avoid it. Obviously, we want to cut the avoidance, but what is the fear usually? And the fear there is the outcome. I'm not going to be able to perform. And again, that's going to look like different things for different men. So it's not uncommon that for some sex therapists, they'll say, okay, no more pornography for 30 days, no masturbation. But what you will do is, instead of having sex to reach a climax as per some form of goal, the goal is simple. You know, for the first week, perhaps you're just in your clothes and you just make out, and that's the extent of any sort of sexual activity. The week after, perhaps the clothes come off and you're repeating the same behavior and seeing what's happening, but you're not attaching any sort of goal to it. Week 3, you might end up escalating it. And I think there is some strong efficacy to suggest that people are able to, for example, maintain erections in that context, or are able to perform, and I say that in quotation marks, but they're able to enjoy the experience because the outcome isn't something that they're fixated on. If the only outcome they have there is just be in the moment, then I think that is a goal that's been achieved.
Well, it sounds like a really justified way to actually be in the moment, to actually enjoy the moment without just saying it verbatim. It sounds like a bit more of a structured approach, doesn't it? So
yeah.
if it means taking it step by step and stripping things back, going back down to your foundational sense of what it means to get you aroused, because maybe there are problems with arousal. Awesome. You've stripped it back and you're taking things step by step, and you're slowly over time going to expose yourself to new things which hopefully heighten that arousal.
And what do you think your association of sex becomes? How is it then different from maybe when you walked into that therapist's office?
You're not thinking about sex with an outcome lens, are you? You're not thinking about sex in a sense of you need to get a result for it to be good.
You might be 100%, and I think you also might be in a position where you're associating it with a really fun time, a really intimate time with your partner, a very vulnerable but really rich experience, rather than a period where you were consistently in your head. I think the truth of the matter is there's a lot of things that are worth unpacking when it comes to this topic, and we've probably only, again, scraped the surface of it. But I think every man's sexual insecurity is going to have different roots, but it'll have common trends. And I think the pornography piece, like if we were ever going to get prescriptive, I think pornography isn't overly helpful. I think for young impressionable men, I think it's probably quite adverse in some ways.
I would go as far to say it's not helpful at all. So if there was one thing to stamp out immediately, if you find yourself engaging in, it would be that. But otherwise, in summary, we've discussed some really well-researched solutions here, which have been proven to work and have been scientifically and evidence-based, discussed and practiced. But as we have also prefaced, it's all very contextual and everyone does present differently. Not one size does fit all here. So absolutely speak to a health professional about this if it is bothering you, if it is something that is on your mind. Speak to the professionals and you'll probably already reap amazing rewards just by getting those things off your chest.
Amen. On that note, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do rate us 5 stars. See you next week.
Bye-bye.